Welcome, everyone, to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Sean Frasick, and with me today is Fritz, who just ate a bunch of deviled eggs, so this should be interesting. Stephen, so our guest today is Stephen Knight. Stephen Knight is a blogger, vlogger, host of the award-winning Godless Spellchecker Podcast. He's also been rubbing elbows with some of comedy's legends these days, and you've been appearing on a lot of radio shows and television shows, Stephen. How you doing?
I am doing well. I am a media whore, is what you're essentially saying.
Yeah, and everyone's calling you a free speech. What is it? Free speech actor, advocate.
Advocate. Yeah, you know, it's funny that because I was on LBC radio the other night, and the producer was talking, asking me how I'd like to be introduced.
Yeah.
And he described me as a free speech campaigner, and I said, now say advocate. If you call me a campaigner, people are going to expect me to do some sort of work. And nobody needs that kind of thing in their life.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, it's funny how we see free speech advocate when there shouldn't even be.
What a ridiculously redundant term that is, free speech advocate. There's I say redundant, but it seems increasingly necessary nowadays to champion the principles of free speech. People seem to have lost the art of defending it, unfortunately.
The UK is freaking me out just with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't bleed over here. And it's something I never really thought would happen in your neck of the woods. It reminds me or makes me think of Hyde Park. Have you ever participated in Speaker's Corner? And what is the culture over there right now at this point versus maybe 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I've been to Speaker's Corner a few times. I've made some video content there as well, and it is an interesting dynamic. The times when I've been there, I'm not sure if it's just because of the nature of the events that were there at the time, but it just seems like an Islamist hellhole. At the minute, there's a lot of radical Islamic preachers hanging out there arguing, which is obviously their right as well. But it's amazing how quick an audience forms around you when you start speaking. I was challenging a preacher there. I've got it on video, and it was just the two of us when we started, and then about 3 minutes in, I looked around and there was a big crowd forming around you, and it's quite an exciting thing, really, to have this place that's designated the area where you can go and speak your mind and invite debate and things like that. There's been a few instances of violence and overspilling, and I know there's an ongoing issue about public prayer at the minute. It's forbidden to have any sort of religious act in that park at the moment, and I think there's Muslim groups who go there for their daily prayers, and people are challenging that at the moment. But I mean, it's interesting. I mean, is there nothing analogous to that sort of thing in the US where people will congregate and debate?
Not really that I can.
In DC, obviously, it depends on what's happening. So there's we have the Democratic National Convention coming to Milwaukee next year, which is crazy. The fact that Milwaukee got it, such a small city, and it's going to be chaos. It's going to be a circus. So like around that event, you're going to see a lot of people with dialogue, filming, things like that. But as far as like a place to go where that's the point of it, not necessarily. I mean, maybe
I guess our Constitution protects us and we have that ability to just do it anywhere.
Yeah.
I'd love a First Amendment in the UK. I really would push for some sort of legislation that protects absolute freedom of expression. I think the US is the gold standard, really, for freedom of expression.
Well, for right now, I mean, but the tech companies, social media companies right now, I mean, that's, unfortunately, that is somebody's voice these days, and we're seeing how that's being taken away from people.
That's really interesting. There's a big discussion there because a lot of people will just throw out a kind of thought-terminating cliche with that one and just say, well, these are private entities, they can do what they want. And I think we all agree that that's true. But when these huge tech companies and social media companies have so much influence over the discourse and politics and activism and things like that, they have a monopoly on the way we communicate. And if you start banning people or exempting people based on their political views, it's a very precarious situation. And I think there should be a lot more pushback on that.
Yeah, I agree. And did you see that Jordan Peterson announced his social media platform?
Yeah, what's that called? ThinkSpot?
Yeah.
ThinkSpot, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah, we actually signed up for the beta. That's interesting.
So he's pledged to only ban people if he's requested to by a sort of law official or something like that. Is that right?
That's a good question. That's I was actually looking into it yesterday. It kind of sounds like that's the case. But I guess we're gonna just have to wait and see, because how much freedom is too much freedom in that type of platform. I mean, you don't want it to devolve into chaos.
It'd be another 4chan.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting. It looks like Sargon, Michael Shermer, and Dave Rubin are kind of the big three that are going to be beta testing their podcast. So
now, Sean, yesterday you did mention that you do think that as free as a platform could be, you think that should be some sort of restrictions on what can be said or what can be shared.
Yeah, I don't think you can
outside of like breaking the law.
Yeah, that's the restriction.
Is that the only restriction?
Yeah, you can't incite to violence. You can't harass people, and you got to follow what the law states. I think
the most important feature really would be to give the users the ability to block and mute and sort of customize their own experience. I think you can mitigate a lot of the dickheads for one.
Steven? Oh.
Hello, Steven?
I think we lost him. Oh.
Of a better word, if you can sort of customize your viewing experience.
Steven?
Did I lose you? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah, you cut out for like 5 seconds there.
Okay.
It's that UK internet, man. I experienced it firsthand.
Is there any law, any British law, when interpreted kind of loosely, if there are loose interpretations of the law by judges, where there is a version of freedom of expression or freedom of speech, like where some lawyers have said, well, we kind of have a version of this, or is it absolute? Like there is nothing that really protects someone's opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it is protected, sort of freedom of conscience and the freedom to speak your mind. That is part of our law, but it's also in direct contradiction to the kind of draconian hate speech laws we have, which are very, very broad and not particularly well defined. And the way the police categorize these things is a nightmare. So, for instance, if you're walking down the street and somebody insults you, and you say to the police you think you were insulted solely because of your race, religion, gender, sexuality, the police will then log that as a hate incident, and that gets added to our inflated hate speech and hate incident stats that we see every year. So it's and even actually, you don't even have to be the target of quote unquote hateful speech. If you witness some speech and you decide that's based on sex, gender, ethnicity, and religion and things like that, and you report it to the police and say you think that's hate speech, they log it as hate speech as well, and will investigate it under that premise. So it's very, very strange. I mean, we've seen record numbers of people being arrested in the UK for things they put on social media. Some things, do sound quite hateful, and some things are just jokes, and there seems to be no sort of consensus or clear definition of where the line is, which is probably the most worrying thing about it.
Where do we see society versus the police force right now? I mean, if I was a police officer, I'm hired to uphold the law, I might kind of look at my brain a little bit more often. Every time I have to arrest someone for just saying something on Twitter. Or how does the public kind of view the police force right now? Is it an abuse of their powers, or are they, are they managing something that they really don't understand and can't handle?
I think the public are increasingly becoming tired of the idea that police must intervene on speech. We've seen a lot more pushback in recent years than we have, but I kind of suspect the police don't want to be doing it either. I think they'd much rather be doing some actual work rather than knocking on people's doors for nasty comments on Facebook. They just seem, like you say, because it's law, they have to follow it up. But it's strange as well in the case of Dankula. I think the police took their own initiative on that. I don't actually think they received any complaints for that video he made. So that's a very strange thing. There has been instances as well of certain police forces posting out sort of bizarrely threatening messages on Facebook and Twitter via their social media streams, warning people to watch their language, and very Big Brother-esque comments about we're watching and we're monitoring, so mind your mouth kind of thing. And it just seems like a huge waste of time and resources. I don't think the police should be socially engineering in that sense. I think people should be able to sort out what's the acceptable parameters of speech in society themselves.
Yeah, and take us through. This is interesting because it's playing out in the comedy world. Take us through Joe Brand and that situation with Nigel Farage.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Joe Brand's a sort of really well-known comedian in the UK. She's been around forever, since I was a child. She does a lot of the panel shows, a lot of some of the political satirical shows as well. And she was on a BBC radio show called Heresy. And the premise of that show is not only is it a comedy, but you're there to make opinions, divulge opinions that you think are a bit twisted or evil or things you wouldn't normally say. So that's the context. And she, in reference to this spate of, milkshaking's become a verb in the UK now. I'm not sure if you're aware. We've seen political candidates, mostly on the right, getting milkshakes thrown over them. Carl Benjamin, as we know, Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage. And she made a kind of flippant comment that why, something along the lines of why throw milkshakes when you can throw battery acid. And then she kind of qualified that with saying she'd never do it. It's just a fantasy, which is kind of the premise of the show. And there was uproar on the internet. The outrage mob got their pitchforks together and went for Joe Brand, demanding that she get fired and demands that the police investigate, which is fairly standard of somebody being offensive in the UK. What was quite surprising was to see people like Nigel Farage and Gerard Batten, who kind of self-style themselves as protectors of freedom of expression, and they campaign a lot on the fact that they're anti-PC culture. And there they are responding to a joke from a comedian by demanding that the police get involved. And the police did get involved. And I'm happy to say that they've decided there's no case to pursue there. There is probably a further discussion to be had about what the result of that may have been if Joe Brand was considered right-leaning and she'd made them comments about somebody considered left-leaning. But it looks like it won't go anywhere. But I think people need to sort of grow up and stop thinking that the first port of call for everything that offends you has to be the police. It's a very strange situation.
Yeah, isn't it a little hypocritical for Nigel to even have that position?
Yeah, I mean, some of his followers may say that the larger point that he's making there is pointing out the hypocrisy that a lot of people who are, followers of UKIP who have been targeted by the police for, hateful, quote unquote, hateful jokes or hateful speech, they get investigated. So why is it okay for a sort of left-wing BBC commentator / comedian to get away with it? But yeah, I think you've got to, even if you are pointing out the hypocrisy, you've got to hold to your principles and still say that she shouldn't be arrested or lose a job for it.
Yeah, I definitely was. Well, not without knowing Nigel personally, I was looking at it under that lens where he's just kind of using their own weapon against them.
Yeah, it's always a bad tactic, though, that, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can point out the hypocrisy without actually even calling for it, especially when you know how busy and how important the resources are that surround police. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And how expensive that is. So, it's interesting. That was interesting. And yeah, the milkshaking thing, I experienced it firsthand. I was out in the UK.
Oh yeah, of course. You was right in the thick of it, wasn't you?
Yeah. I was in Truro, Plymouth, and Totnes. And yeah, it was interesting. The one thing I feel better about the US in the sense that I feel better that everyone's crazy. Typically you see a lot of this stuff coming out of the US, but man, the protesters that were there were just absolutely insane. But the other thing that I found is interesting, it's very transparent. It's a game of outrage. It's like an outrage economy, outrage 15 minutes of fame culture. A lot of the protesters that were protesting Carl's just talking in a square came in really hot. As soon as the BBC took their photos and did the interview or whatever, they left. It was pretty much they were just there for that. Also, the milkshakes made a lot of news, but there's actually people literally batting rant, like charging Carl, and he had like 5 guys around him. They busted their ass the whole day, but they would try to just batter ram right through the security guards to get to him and hit him or tackle him and stuff.
That's concerning. I mean, these people think they're the good guys. And they're so intolerant and very quick to reach for a violent response. And they think they're the good guys. This is where this kind of self-righteous ideology gets you. You think, anything's permissible because you're in the right. And we're having a situation now where mainstream commentators and outlets and the general discussions favoring milkshaking. We're celebrating this thing, which is at its essence political assault. And I'm fully aware that somebody getting covered in milkshakes not the worst thing to happen on the planet, but it's very self defeating, because you're not going to change anyone's minds. The people who are supporting people like Carl Benjamin and UKIP and what have you aren't going to see that and think maybe I should consider the other side of the argument now. And it's this idea that not only that you don't want somebody to speak, but you get to decide that nobody else can hear them as well. Because when people get a milkshake thrown over them, that's pretty much, I mean, not in the case of Carl, I think he carried on, but people like Farage, as soon as they get a milkshake thrown over them, security decide it's too much of a dangerous situation for them to make their appearance. And those people that have turned up to find out what they've got to say can no longer hear them. So you're deciding for other people what they get to hear at the same time, which is a very authoritarian response to political debate.
Yeah, I mean, you also don't know what's in that milkshake.
Yeah, that's
a genuine concern. I mean, Sam Harris brought this up on Twitter, which is an aspect of all this that I hadn't really considered. And he says words to the effect of, you're just advertising how accessible these people are, how vulnerable they are, how lacking their security is to would-be assassins, which is a scary thought.
Well, it was funny too, because there's a stark difference between the U.S. and the U.K. and that I experienced firsthand. Those that are throwing milkshakes or like trying to throw punches, there's this one lady who's very creative. There's a lot of birds in like the Truro Square, so she was throwing bread and throwing bread in Carl's direction, throwing it all over him. So the birds would swoop down, try and get the bread and simultaneously hit Carl. The police were there, but they would move those people aside and thank them for exercising their right to political protest. In the U.S., if you're throwing punches and milkshakes and stuff, you're going to jail. And that there's a big difference there. So,
did you see? I only very briefly saw it, and I'm not sure if you'd returned home at this point. But Carl was also campaigning somewhere else, and somebody in the crowd had a placard that read "Allah is gay," and the police officer was you there when that happened?
Yeah.
So a police officer took it upon themselves to confiscate that, which I thought is a very, very scary prospect. The police are enforcing Islamic blasphemy laws on the street of the UK, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, and I had a glass bottle of water, and they asked me to discard of that. I was like, I totally get it, because if someone threw that, that's really going to do damage. But yeah, a sign, that's scary. Confiscating a sign. So. I don't know. It was quite the experience. But kind of getting off of the left's craziness, we kind of we're seeing this new thing with the straight pride parade. Have you seen this, Steven? No, I think we lost him.
He's taking his time drinking that cup really slowly, and
yeah, he's it's the UK internet, man. Like when I got back from the UK, Steven, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you see me? Can you hear me? I can't see you guys anymore. It looks like you've been raptured from my perspective.
Oh no, we're still there. I think you're having some technical issues.
Oh no, we're back. So I think you was talking about the straight pride parade. Yeah, and I'm quite. I mean, as far as I can tell, it was a handful of people that have kind of put this event forward, and the media response to it and the anger seems slightly disproportionate to a handful of people that, by all accounts,
it's the UK, man. It's the UK. We're gonna have to tell them again. I was so happy. No, now you're back.
You're back.
You're back.
Maybe if I might be able to plug a network cable in.
I'll tell you this, when I got back to the States, I was like, I'll never take our internet speed for granted again.
Hang on. Might be able to do something about this.
Yeah.
This is great content, by the way.
I found it, I mean, I knew it was predictable. I knew that there would be an outrage. over something, as innocuous as I'm straight and I want to have a parade for it. I'm trying to think of some other examples of what kind of parades people would have. It's like, what if males wanted to have a parade for their right to vote and say, hey, let's have this parade and just be proud that we can continue to vote our opinions in this democracy. That would piss a bunch of people off.
Well, you just gave someone an idea now. So,
yeah. I mean, I mean, it seems like one big trolling attempt to me, and the outrage to it just seems strangely disproportionate. I don't know why people care. If people want to put on a straight parade, fine, why not? I think pride, to be honest, has become more of a corporate thing and a kind of cynical exploitation of the pink pound in recent years. Anyway, I mean, I think it's less about activism and more about celebration, I think now, which is a great thing. It's not, it's not criticism, but I just feel it's as a movement, it's pretty much done its best work.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think the outrage from the press is unfortunate. I mean, the fact that we even know about it when we heard about it, I mean, it's because of the outrage. Why would you get so upset about something that obviously is trolling, where obviously the press is giving them exactly what they want, free coverage? I mean,
you see this all the time. It's standard now, and it's lazy journalism. You'll see outrage at a certain issue, and you log on to the article, and it's 4 fucking tweets.
Yeah.
Is the premise for the outrage. Now I'm thinking, you've literally gone out and sought them, you found them, and now you're giving them to the masses and whipping up a bit of hysteria over a non-incident that most people would ignore anyway.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this conversation kind of with Fritz yesterday and with someone else on the idea of protesting. The idea, to me personally, I think the idea of protesting, actually getting out there, is one of the laziest things you can do. If you truly are inspired and passionate to make social change, whatever it is, or whatever kind of change, there are a lot better, more effective ways to go about it. That's raising money, that's donating to, organizations that support what you're trying to change, whatever, running for office, things like that. There's things you can actually do to make change. And I think protesting, a lot of times when you show up, it actually does more damage than good.
There's a lot of posers present at these things. People who want the selfie, who said they stood up to fascism or whatever the cause of the day is. And it's an interesting thing as well. I don't know if you know Tommy Robinson, the anti-Islam activist in the UK, huge name. He was touring my neck of the woods, the northwest of England, in his campaign for an MEP in the EU, and the crowds he were commanding and people that were turning up were huge, and it gave this facade of mass amount of support for him. And like you said, it's easy just to turn out into the streets. And as soon as it came time to vote for him and put your money where your mouth is, the numbers just didn't correlate with the scenes we saw on the streets as well. So yeah, like you said, it is the laziest form of political activism, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just it always, we're not going to get into the Oberlin College stuff, but that there's a ton of protests that cause a ton of damage to a local bakery, and now they're awarded $33 million from this college, and that was pushing this idea of going out and protest, and it always devolves into violence, throwing stuff. I mean, it's can we just calm down?
Just chill out, everybody.
Just chill. I mean, honestly, the best thing you can do is ignore it. The second best thing you can do is do other things that counter it in a more effective way. If it's just like with the atheism stuff. Early on in our organization, we like when we first started, there was this we were talking about atheism and normalizing atheism, and there was this debate amongst the group where it was like, do we, some people wanted to go like make picket signs for churches and go out, stand outside of churches and say, oh, whatever, blah blah blah, and we decided against that because it's completely ineffective. Not only are you harassing these people that have no idea, they're just going to dig in even more. But you're actually not offering a counter narrative. You're not actually offering anything that is going to further the
and it pisses people off. I mean, you look at some of the tactics groups like Black Lives Matter have enacted in terms of blocking roads and ruining people's day and shutting down transport and things like that. And people just want to get to work and go about their day at the end of the day. And you're not winning any friends by doing disruptive protests.
Have you found yourself being labeled alt-right out there?
All the time, yeah. It gets interchanged with far right, right wing, alt right, neo-Nazi, fascist, white supremacist. I got told that I was defending white identity politics a little while back, and I asked for examples, and the example given was that I've never defended Black Lives Matter, which is a very strange way of defending white identity politics.
Yeah, I of course I can't remember the exact example now, but Carl recently was being named alt-right as well, or a racist, because he took a neutral stance on a matter, but because he took a neutral stance on it, you're supporting it. So
what was the thing that was it? Ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, just stating the facts.
Yeah,
Fritz is our color guy. He likes to really have the details for the stories ready.
What is the situation right now with the commercials in England right now? I see that there's a ban on offensive gender stereotypes. Have you already been seeing some of that coming out on the
Yeah, and it's it kind of started a little bit from what I could tell. Our London Mayor Sadiq Khan, which he's a bit of a mixed bag. I don't really feel much about him in general, which probably tells you what he's like. But he was taking exception to adverts on the tube which would depict women in bikinis. This idea of body positivity and fat shaming and making people feel bad for not being supermodels and things like that. So they're kind of, that was one of the first things to go. And now they're talking about not having the stereotypical man, doing the manual labor work or the heavy lifting in the adverts, and the mum being the heart of the home, making the food and looking after the children. They're trying to erase that and kind of make this really boring, dull, equal society where everybody's exactly the same and we're all robots. And I just don't care enough about it, to be honest. And it's just a strange thing not showing like in shape models in bikinis in adverts for like summer wear and things like that, because advertising, one of the things that helps sell products is this idea of aspiration, goals, things that you want to be, not necessarily the things you are. And I think if people want to use that kind of marketing strategy, I don't think the government should be telling them that they can't. I mean, as well, I don't know if you saw, this is where feminism has got us now. We have the Formula One racing in the UK, and we have the things called, I think they refer to as pit girls. They're very scantily clad ladies and models. I think they may even dance. They're kind of like cheerleaders, I think, would be the closest comparison. And that was campaigned against to remove from the sport by kind of overzealous feminists. And that campaign was successful. And then we found a handful of girls out of jobs because of it. So feminism's actually campaigning to get women out of paid work now, which is a very curious situation. The same kind of feminists that will champion and defend sex workers and try and fight for their right to do that and try and get that legalized are also saying that girls cannot be in sport if they're going to objectify themselves, which is a very strange hypocrisy.
Well, that's strange. I didn't know that darts were such a big thing in the UK either, and apparently they had women as well, kind of up to recently, and now they moved from that competition as well.
Right, I wasn't aware of that. I think I'm not really into my darts. I think it is a very British thing to. I mean, it's a pub game essentially, isn't it? It's a very British thing to get a load of people tanked up on alcohol and give them, kind of sharp objects to throw at the wall. It's
that's right.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
It's like the lawn darts we used to have in the U.S.
Yeah, I hope one of the stereotypes that goes away then is the bumbling idiot dad. If that's the case, then
and that's not just advertising. That's across every single sitcom, animation, movie, and I don't take that as a personal slight. I don't want to campaign to get that removed. It's strange,
right? Yeah, it's interesting you say that though. As far as like the feminists that support sex work, that's one of the panels we have at the Minds event. Not all of them do, and that's the interesting part of it too. I always thought you know, feminism was to empower women and, you know, have them do whatever they want, essentially. And I'm learning, Brian already knew all this stuff, but I'm learning that there's a faction of them that don't support that, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this conversation. Admittedly, I don't know in a huge amount of detail, but I think people shouldn't. I just wish there was more of an emphasis on discussing the reality of it. I think it's kind of glamorized a little bit, this idea of the sex worker, this free, independent woman who's taking control and earning money. And you find a lot of the time there's a lot of issues with mental health, drug dependency, abuse, exploitation, things like that. I think people just need to, if they are going to discuss it and champion it, I just think need to give a better overall picture than talking about it solely in the terms of an empowered female.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say terrible transition, but I want to say congratulations on your recent success and everything that's been going on. One of the things we've always really valued has been comedy, and we've worked with a lot of comedians that are in the U.S. and lately, you've been working with Ricky Gervais, which is one of my heroes as far as free speech. I'm sure you saw his latest Netflix special, which was unbelievable. It was brilliant. Yeah. So take us through that. How did you guys start working together? You've been doing this podcast, things like that?
Yeah, I just kept threatening him, basically. I've just got some dirt on him. Essentially, I know things that he wouldn't want to be made public, so I'm kind of holding him hostage. No, Ricky's been someone who's been incredibly kind and generous to me for no reason I can really tell. He noticed I was sending, kind of pithy tweets years ago, mocking religion and going for religious fundamentalists. And out the blue, he kind of promoted that. He told other people to take a look at it and follow what I was doing. And he said he found it funny. And from there, I kind of expanded what I produced. I started writing, I started making podcasts. And I thought, you can't have a connection to one of the most famous comedians on the planet and not kind of ask him to come on your show. And surprisingly, he said yes. So it kind of been back and forth and kept in communication in various ways since. And he started doing this brilliant show on Sirius FM, Deadly Serious, and it's unique in a way because he's this massive, ginormous comedian with this global reach and all this influence, and he could discuss anything. He could talk absolute bollocks basically, but he's chose to talk about free speech and religion and culture and the political climate. And obviously it's infused with humor as well. And it's a little bit silly at times, but he's just invited me along, and I'm really enjoying it. It's the easiest hour of anything I get to do. You turn up and what you see is what you get with Ricky. He's exactly how you'd imagine he is. And it's not planned. It's all off the cuff and you just go. And I don't have to fucking edit it when we're done as well, which is always a bonus. So yeah, no, that's great fun. I'm very, very lucky to be doing that.
Yeah, and he's been taking on social politics for a while. I mean, even with The Office, I mean, he would always push the line as far as what you can say, what you can't say in The Office. And obviously, it's extremely successful spinoff.
He's very switched on. He has this, I think, with Ricky as well. He knows people. He's got he's got very high emotional intelligence as well. He's good with people. I think he knows what makes them tick.
Yeah.
I think he's good. He's the kind of person who can kind of strike up a conversation with anyone from any walk of life. I would imagine. There's no kind of air of sort of rich celebrity about him or anything like that. He's very casual, very jovial. It's nice to spend time with. But I'm very pleased that someone with his stature is taking a swing at political correctness, because you think if anyone's going to take political correctness to task, it would be the comedians, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You rely on the comedians and the satirists to do this, and they've just gone missing in recent years. And we even see it go the other way. There's a handful of comedians in the UK now that are promoting this idea of woke comedy, which is just the death of humor, as far as I can see.
Yeah, for sure. And I've always seen comedians being really at the front lines of free speech activism. I'd say one of my favorite quotes attributed to Ricky is, if somebody said we're banning religion, I'd march to not have it banned, because it's your right to believe what you want, and it's your right to be wrong, and I'll fight for that right. And I just love that quote.
So what is his take like with the comedians in the UK that are getting in trouble? I mean, you guys, seriously, you've created this underground comedy scene, right? Essentially, where you guys literally go underground, and it's kind of like you can say whatever you want.
It's interesting that.
Yeah, go for
I mean, I don't know if you're aware of Andrew Doyle. He's a comedian. He writes for Spiked. He's also behind the wonderful satirical Twitter account Titania McGrath. I don't know if you've seen that, which is just excellent.
Loves that page.
Yeah, really amazing, razor sharp lampooning of the whole social justice movement and woke politics. And he's a lovely guy. I've met him. I'm seeing him on Monday actually. And he's a wonderfully accomplished stand-up comedian in his own right. And he runs a comedy club called Comedy Unleashed, which is in Bethnal Green in London. I've been down and watched a comedy night there, and it's this idea that the comedy is there to push the boundaries. People may get offended, but that's okay because we've all opted into this situation now where we're not going to heckle, we're not going to, cause a fuss, we're not going to whinge on Twitter. We're going to accept it for what it is, which is comedy that might push a few boundaries. And what's really interesting about it as well is, I mean, what's strange is that we have to state that now about comedy, because I always thought that's what comedy was, or comedy that was worth your time anyway. But even more so than that, the event I went to, the comedians there were nothing there that was really that you could point and say was egregious anyway. So we're in this situation now where we're fighting for the right to have comedy that was commonplace, or, say things that was commonplace in the comedy scene 10 years ago. It seems like a strange regression.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's exactly it. And it's like, oh my God, it's have we gotten to a point where people just have gotten so much bubble around them with helicopter parenting and everything else that's happening that they just can't even listen to words? I mean, that's scary, I mean, if you don't like it, you don't agree with it, great, but are we really going to get that upset to the point where we're in tears or we're calling for police?
Some people do. I mean, some people do. For me, it was a wake-up call when I heard words are violence. I was like, oh my goodness. And microaggressions are a slow version of killing someone off. It's just like, oh my goodness.
That's a scary concept that's creeped in the last few years. Words are violence. And I often see that invoked in defense of political violence, because when people attack people for speech physically, if they can tell themselves that, well, the words they're using are violence, they can justify their violence as an act of self-defense. They can say, well, they acted violent first by saying something which could put a certain group in danger or incite this and that, so I'm justified in attacking them, in punching them, and we're getting very close to punch a Nazi territory again here, I think.
Do you find yourself walking on eggshells in any way? I mean, you are in New Jersey for our event. You're going to be on a panel talking about digital and physical migration. John Cleese just said London is no longer English. Do you find you're walking on eggshells, kind of promoting or communicating your version of comedy as an Englishman?
Definitely with humor. Opinions, no, because I choose my words carefully and I say what I think, and I am careful to not be misunderstood. I'm not scared that a mask is going to slip and I'm going to reveal a racist opinion or something. I'm scared that something can be misinterpreted if I don't give it the correct caveat. So I try to think about things a little clearly. Definitely in regards to humor, I have a very dark sense of humor. I tone that down by at least 95% when I'm speaking publicly. If you were to hear things I'd say to my friends and family, I would never appear in public ever again. So that's the line. And yeah, humor, I mean, people treat jokes about bad things as if they are the same as the bad thing, and I think there's certain people, and I don't know if it's genetic, they just don't have a funny bone in their body, and they're incapable of deciphering serious comments from jokes as well, and they take it as a personal affront when they hear something they don't like. And the idea that we should socially engineer the planet to make sure that you don't hear anything that may or may not offend you is a very, very dull society to live in.
Well, and it's funny too, because it's actually the opposite. If you can't joke about it, it actually makes that thing more powerful. And especially in the UK, you guys had Harry Potter. That's where it came from. Didn't Harry Potter teach the lesson of say his name? Because if you say his name, you take away the power of that thing, right?
Yeah, it's also as well. I don't know what the gallows humor's like in the States, but it's widespread in the UK. Whenever there's a public tragedy or a death of a famous person, within minutes there'll be a joke circulating about it, and that's part of the process. That's part of the process of discussing it, getting by a horrific event, is to make jokes about it, and promote a bit of levity in that regard. That's all part of the human process of dealing and deciphering hard and upsetting events.
Yeah. Where's the line right now? Again, public sentiment, you being there on the front lines with Boris Johnson's recent statement. Is it just bad comedy? Is it Islamophobic when he's refusing to apologize for stating that women that wear burqas look like letterboxes?
It's really interesting that, because Boris Johnson was actually in the article he wrote about that. His entire thrust of the article was to defend the right of Muslim women to wear the burqa, and I think this was a response to, I think it may have been Denmark, who were proposing a ban on it. He was saying that was a bad idea, that was authoritarian, that's illiberal. He was making an argument for the women, but he was saying we should still reserve the right to say it looks ridiculous, and liberals just lost their head at that very, very simple premise. And I think what happens is in this if you asked about where the line might be moments ago, and I think it probably ends with anything that can be considered vaguely racially orientated. So for instance, Joe Brand can joke about throwing battery acid at a politician, literally joke about a political assault, physically harming someone, an act of violence. She gets to keep her job. But Danny Baker, who's another British personality, can send a tweet out which he's not racist, he didn't intend it as racist, but some people perceived it as racist, and that was enough to get him fired from his job. So just this perception that something might be racist seems to top the top of the scale in terms of this intersectionality concern we have. So if anything that seems to be racist, or can be perceived as racist, or can be misinterpreted as racist, that's where the line is. I think that's the thing that'll get you in trouble faster than anything in the UK at the moment, which is, it's a very strange culture to have, to be told on one hand you're a white supremacist nation, and then anyone who's perceived to say anything racist can find themselves with their career in tatters and be persona non grata in the same instant.
Yeah, I definitely see myself I see the line, or at least with my perception, that, women or men, if they're in a burqa, have the right, or should have the right to,
men don't wear burqas.
I'm saying, if you don't know that, they do. Suicide bombers have worn burqas.
Oh, true.
So the point being, and then that's a connection to the other piece about public safety. You can wear whatever you want to wear as part of a liberal society. But when it comes to the point where you can't identify an individual, it just kind of seems like it's just kind of taking away from that safety net. Exactly. I mean, you can't you can't get on an airplane without showing your face. There's definitely a purpose. For example, a beekeeper.
Yeah.
Well, we know that there's a purpose when they're working with bees for their own protection and their own safety.
Yeah.
But
it's antisocial, isn't it? And I think the balance would be to have it banned anywhere where you're not allowed to cover your face in general. So we're talking like courtrooms, banks, places like that. When you're going into an area where it's paramount to be able to identify who you are.
Yeah.
But I think there should be a lot more pushback on it. It's become a sort of cause of feminists, third wave feminists as well, the hijab and the burqa, and this you've got this kind of garment of patriarchal oppression, and you have feminists wearing it in solidarity with Muslims, and that makes my head explode. There's a lot of work to be done in the West in regards to feminism, it seems.
Well, I think it's true. I think it also boils down to ignorance of the West. I mean, they see, instead of looking at the actual issue with the burqas and the hijab, they're looking at quote unquote protect a minority that they feel they need to protect. And the hijab, the burqa, those are symbols of oppression, and there's women losing their lives in Saudi Arabia and Iraq for taking it off, for fighting the establishment and fighting the oppression. And those are the women we should be supporting, not the women that choose to go along with the oppression. If they want to do it because Muhammad told them to, 2,000 years ago, whatever, go ahead. But we should be supporting the women in Iraq and Iran that are literally risking their lives to stand up against that oppression.
Yeah, it makes me depressed when I see these women in Iran, these strong, courageous individuals going against a sort of tyrannical culture and government to, the cost of their freedom and sometimes their lives for it. And that to me is what brave feminism is, and that can't be celebrated enough. And then when you look at the kind of the Western context and the Western feminist story of the day is that somebody called me sweetheart in an airport, and it really makes my head spin.
I know it,
unfortunately.
And I give you so much credit because you do a lot for the ex-Muslim community, and it's funny because the ex-Muslim community, although they are pretty liberal in comparison to their roots, they're still kind of conservative when it comes to some of the topics of the day. And it's an interesting situation because even some of the ex-Muslims are called Islamophobes and things of that nature by the left, and it's just like, no, they experience it. What happened to people's experience and the importance of people's experience? These are the people we should be supporting.
The ex-Muslims helped me realize that game is completely rigged. The criticism of Islam game is completely rigged. So it doesn't matter how good your points are, how liberal you are, how much thought you give to the potential bigotry of Muslims and demonization of groups, you will get called a white supremacist or a racist or an Islamophobe. When people do this, I often ask them to name me one public critic of Islam who's acceptable, who's not a bigot, who's not, so we have to either accept that Islam is perfect and that every single critic of it is a bigot, or maybe it's not perfect and there's something else going on. But yeah, ex-Muslims, for me, if you're a staunch liberal, if you're someone who values freedom of expression, religious freedom, and you're against fascism and you're against targeting people for their beliefs, they're the first line on that front, as far as I'm concerned. That's where the only game in town is in terms of them issues. You can always, anything that's visited on people or denied them, there's always an extra level of it when you bring ex-Muslims into the equation. So I'm always happy to support whatever they're doing to kind of raise awareness, even that people do leave the religion, people do speak out about it, and there is this growing movement of people who have first-hand knowledge of the scriptures, have lived the experience of being a Muslim, and can tell you all the issues with it. And they're a valuable source of information and group of people fighting for sort of liberal freedoms.
Yeah, I think Ayan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz, is somebody who has firsthand experience because he was a devout follower. He knows the book, forward and backwards, and now he's speaking, against some of those belief systems, and now he's in, the ultimate self-hater.
Yeah, I have to say it is tiring to be the anti-Islam guy, because it's one of them things that I don't want to speak about it all the time. I don't want to have to be the guy who, on the optics of it, looks like the guy going for the brown people. That's how outsiders see this conversation. People aren't really engaged in the ideology and what's going on. They just see this white guy, punching down on this poor, beleaguered group of ethnic minorities, and it sticks to you a little bit. This idea that you're the bigot, you're the racist, and it can be quite tiring. And I think we've seen a little bit of that in Sam Harris's output these last few years. He seems to have cooled his boots a little bit on this topic and try and focus his attention elsewhere, because it's just a thankless task to be the guy to stand up and say, actually, Islam is a very illiberal ideology and it causes countless amount of suffering globally, and it's not really compatible with liberal values. And to have that opinion can get you in a whole heap of problem. If you don't have your sort of reputation kill, you're also in actual genuine threat of attack from radical fundamentalists as well. So it's not a fun business to be in.
And where are you on Brexit? Because I know that has also been.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
That's also been labeled as like a racist belief system if you're for Brexit. Have you used Brexit or Brexiteers or anti-Brexiters in part of your comedy? Just kind of the craziness that's happening over there?
Yeah, it's it can be lumped into the movements we saw which brought Trump to the White House, the whole Brexit thing. It's this increasing sort of national populism, and people people on the liberal left are absolutely clueless, and the mistakes they made leading up to these events, which were a long time in the coming. People think that this political shift just happened overnight, and there's been a deep feeling of unrest in the working classes that the sort of liberal elites, shall we say, people who are in power in politics, don't have the best interests of the common man and woman at heart, and that people just want a change. And the left-leaning liberal circles didn't provide any options in that regard. They just kept repeating the same things, accused everyone of wanting change, of being racist and bigots, and then obviously we get Brexit, we get Trump, and the left has just gone down the same avenues again. They've doubled down on this kind of rhetoric. So everyone who voted for Trump was a racist, which we know can't be true, because this is the same people who voted for Obama in 2 terms before. It's a significant portion. I think in terms of Brexit as well, I think I read something like 1 in 3 ethnic minorities voted for Brexit as well. And it's just people unhappy with the current political system and want some change. And that's what Brexit symbolizes to a lot of people. And this idea of the sort of knuckle dragging racist thug bringing Brexit in, those people don't vote. Those people don't get up and go out. You might turn up to one of Sean's protests, but they don't tend to vote as much, I don't think. So the worst thing about Brexit is everyone knew it was a kind of an uncertainty when they voted for it, and that's where we are. Nobody knows what it's going to look like, and all the scare stories and the doom and gloom and the sky is falling rhetoric's coming quick and fast, and people are talking about it in very emotive terms. I spoke to a family member not long ago, and someone quizzed them about Brexit, and she was saying that she doesn't know anyone who voted Brexit. And I'm kind of thinking, I bet you do. I bet you do know people who voted Brexit. The problem is we've created this climate now where people who have voted for this have become so demonized and shouted down. They can't feel that they can state their opinions openly in public. So they wait till they get in the voting booth, and that's why people get blindsided. That's why all the polls said Brexit had never happened. That's why all the polls said Donald Trump would never get in. And lo and behold, here we are. And I don't think there's going to be any response to it soon to kind of bring politics to a more centrist, even less chaotic position. I think this national populism is only going to increase over the next few generations as well.
Yeah, I was going to lead into that. What do you think is going to happen next? Because a lot of times people don't know what's happening until they're in the middle of it. Yeah, I think people will look back in history and look at Gamergate as potentially one of the beginning instigators for this line of things that are occurring in our society, at least Western society. Do you see the possibility of civil war potentially happening in your country?
I don't like to invoke that for the purpose. I mean, for one of the reasons, it feels like and not necessarily hyperbole, but it kind of feels not a little bit of a sort of doomsday conspiracy type rhetoric, and I kind of have a bit more hope and expectation of the British public not to take up arms. But I think societies are precarious things. I don't think people understand how rare it is to have some functioning civil societies in this way, where we're all getting up in the morning, going to work, coming home, and for the most part remain unharmed and get along, and we're not fighting strangling our neighbors over land disputes or random tribal concerns. It works pretty well in comparison to a lot of places in the world. So they could be an instigation that changes that, but I'd like to remain more optimistic on that front. But the clash of civilizations narrative is something that's picked up a lot more attention, and a lot more people are invoking that in discussion now than they were before. But it remains to be seen. I think you are right when you say you don't realize these things are happening until you're in the thick of it. So I hope we don't see anything that can be described as a civil war, and I'm kind of optimistic on that front that we won't.
Yeah, and I did, one of the things I noticed being in the UK, granted I was in the countryside of England, but at those, at Sargon's, talks where he's talking in the square, there were a lot of angry people, Me as an American, the first thing I was thinking was gun. Someone's got a gun. Who's got the gun? Looking for guns. And then I was actually having conversations with people afterwards. Yeah, no one has guns. I mean, no one here has guns. So it was a different climate. I mean, yes, it was there's a lot of testosterone happening, a lot of anger going on, but as far as like pulling out a gun and going nuts, that's not a thing there. So that was actually a a positive experience. You know?
Yeah, this anger in the air over political disagreement is palpable in the UK at the moment. I think it can be kind of linked back to the fact that a lot of people kind of wed their politics to their sense of virtue, their self-worth. They are politics because they're the good guy. Their politics are the right politics, the good politics. And when they see Brexit, which is something that they didn't expect and they consider bad, when they see that happen, it's almost like a personal slight. How can this possibly happen? How do we have this reality? I was completely right. I was so sure I had the right answers, and reality is not conforming to that. And I think when they see somebody like Carl Benjamin commanding a crowd as well, that they think, well, that shouldn't be happening because he's this bad guy, he's this rape threatening, white supremacist, all the other smears they've thrown at him in the response to some of his content. So I just think people start these debates and come into this conversation already at a 10 in terms of their anger and their frustration, and that's a bad way to start, because it's, like I keep saying, and I keep hammering this point home to everybody who misbehaves in terms of violence or their rhetoric or screams people down. You are not helping the situation. You're only recruiting people onto the opposite side. The side that you're trying to defeat and get out of power is the side that you're doing PR for with your behavior. So you need to engage these people. Exactly.
No, I agree 100%. And we love, Stephen, we love having you as a partner and as a friend. You are coming out to New Jersey in August. You're moderating 2 panels. We got the Great Migration discussion on digital and physical immigration, which obviously you're seeing in the UK, some of that stuff happening. And then also we have the nuanced context and the future of comedy. So really excited about both those panels. And we love having you there because you are the voice of reason. And, all of your tweets, all of your shows, everything I watch, everything I consume, I agree with you almost on all the points that you make. And it's just, I think we just need to get back to having rational opinions based on facts and not emotion.
What the fuck do you mean that you agree with almost?
And I'm really jealous, again, of the comedy scene that you're involved in. I'm going to have to make a trip out there to go to some of those underground comedy clubs. Those sound really, really awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very kind. And I always appreciate the work you guys do. I mean, just hearing them topics as well, you always manage to find the big topic of the day, the thing that's massively important and consequential, but that's also the thing that people aren't discussing particularly well at the time as well. And there's a lot of misinformation and hysteria and posturing around it. So it'll be really nice to get stuck into them things. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is definitely a challenge for us to figure out what's going to be hot moving forward. And we've been lucky so far. We've seen you, for instance, move into the social political realm. I definitely view social justice warriors as a form of religion.
Yeah.
And noticing your symbol, or not your symbol, but your Godless Spellchecker, stop sign symbol, still has the word atheist there. Where is atheism right now in British culture? Is it just kind of something that's kind of on the wayside, and you've kind of moved in social political conversations like we did as a transition?
Yeah, I think on the topic of atheism, I think the issue really is that we won. We kind of got what we wanted in that sense, and there's not a great atheist-based fight in the UK. I mean, I suppose there is if you're sort of a secular
immigration, though. The mass immigration of immigrants, is that kind of bubbling up the ideas of atheism again, or are they assimilating completely and saying atheism is great?
Yeah, no, I think that is a problem, and that should be on the radar of any sort of secular free thinker. But that also attracts people who are on the Christian right as well. I don't think you have to be an atheist per se to sort of see the increase in Islamic ideology in this country that immigration does play a part in, to have concerns about it. So, in terms of British civil society, church attendance is at an all-time low. People who are, identifying as Christian is at an all-time low. People who identify as religious is at an all-time low. So you have this, sliding scale of religiosity in the UK, which is also being met with a massive increase of people who identify as a Muslim as well. So Islam is on the increase, and that doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So that's a concern for a lot of people, and I think it appeals to a vast number of people, rather than just non-believers.
All right. Well, again, as Sean said, I'm so excited to see you again. I'm glad that you are willing to partner with us again for this event in August, the 31st of August in Pittman, New Jersey.
Yep. Use Steven, code Steven.
Yeah. How can we support you? How can
use code Steven to get 10% off on tickets, and the VIP ticket, we just launched that, so that code works there as well.
Yeah. So outside,
I shall share that about. Yeah.
Yeah, outside of that support, again, using Steven with a PH to get that promo code. How can your fans or your new fans or future fans find you and support you?
Yeah, I have a website which I post my podcast to, my blogs, any video. So that's gspellchecker.com. So yeah, people can find me there.
All right. And if we like what you know, as you said recently, if we really like what you're doing, $1 a month.
Yeah. Well, what he does is he just threatens his
yeah,
and then they show up, and that's always a challenge, getting people to support the Patreon. And that's why the Jordan Peterson platform looks pretty interesting, because it is going to be focused on monetizing podcasts, and that's always the biggest challenge, in my opinion. The fact that you've been able to keep it going for so long is very impressive. We've kind of been in the same boat where we've been doing it for years, and it really doesn't bring in any money. But it's got to be it's got to be something you want to do. Otherwise, it gets very, very tough to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what's worse though. I mean, if you did solely rely on it for your income, I don't know how much that would inform the kind of content you put out. If you realize you had to make content to earn a living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I always worry about that as well. It can be a bit of a double-edged sword. If your main source of income is your content, you might start just putting out crap for the sake of content as well. At least I know that everything I put out, I kind of care about, because it's not paying the bills.
Yeah, no, that's one of the other panels. Sorry, Fritz. We'll wrap up, I promise. That's one of the other panels that we're looking at, is how to change your mind, because you're right. A lot of people that are e-celebs or celebrities, whatever, know kind of what their audience wants, and if they actually change their position, can they publicly do so? So it's going to be an interesting conversation there too. So really excited about that.
Yeah, another great topic.
Yeah. Well, Steven, thanks again, man, for coming. We'll see you soon. Stay on the line. We'll just chat. And for those listening, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.